Often in conducting courses at the universities, the access to a live ensemble is not always open. And so what's left to us is either to find a pianist or a small group of musicians to conduct, or we can actually trial our ability to control the gestures, to explore artistic conducting of time patterns, and whether we are actually capable of communicating what we believe the music to be saying and requiring of us through our body gesture. Unfortunately, that's not always possible. Often, to replace that, students will be asked to conduct recordings. I'm sure many of you have thought about that, or you have done it. One of the benefits for me conducting along with a record, well, you gain confidence in your time movement. You get control of conducting in meters, especially asymmetric meters, the ones that are beyond 4/4 time and 3/4 time and 2/4 time. But remember, it's really rudimentary at this point. You're actually following the record. You have no control of that record. The record has control of you. And if you're using the record for that purpose to get the time patterns, then that's okay. I would suggest that you exit that as soon as you can, because if you're not careful, conducting a record will actually lead you to following your ensemble instead of leading your ensemble. It's very, very tricky here. Okay, so the positive is you can learn to control the time patterns, and you can learn the shifts, and you can even actually start to pick up some gestural ideas about controlling expression within time. As the music is actually being, for the most part, expressively performed. And so it's a side benefit to actually pick up some gestures while you're working with the record. That's the positive. The negative is that you could fall into the habit of following, because that's what you're really doing. But that's not the role of a conductor. The role of a conductor is to lead an ensemble in their interpretation of how this works. The time signature is immaterial to how you use it to convey artistic responses that you are looking for. Okay, so what are some other reasons why we may want to conduct along with a record? Well, we can conduct along with a record to experience a particular conductor's interpretation of that piece. And exposing yourself to that's really important, because you may decide, you know what, I really like that interpretation. Okay. The trick, of course, is learning it that way doesn't allow for a lot of scope in moving around it. We tend to learn it one way. I, for one, can remember the tempos of the famous British band classics being conducted by Frederick Fennell and the Eastman Wind Ensemble. And boy, it is really hard to shift those tempos that I learned as a young musician. You know, it's almost as if the first whole suite has to go at that tempo. So there's a danger in working with a recording. I think it's important that we learn to emulate great recordings, but beware of the danger. If that wasn't so, if we were really concerned about ever working with a recording, well, we would never send our art students to art galleries to emulate great artists. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with practicing and working with recordings, but let's not leave that as the only way that we learn. Let's leave it as one of the tools. The danger is always that you become, and it's hard to break out of that bubble. Okay, the next question is, okay, so I've been working with records a lot. How do I break out of this? Well, it was interesting. One time a student of mine wanted for me to experience their conducting, and I assumed that I was going to go watch his ensemble and watch him conduct and have some feedback. what actually happened is we went to his house and he sat me down and he put on a recording, Beethoven's symphony, and he conducted along with the record. And then he asked me what I thought about that. And I said, well, you've been telling me that you have been having problems in your rehearsals with your ensemble where you feel like you're following them. Well, you've done a great job of following that record. But you're going to have to get out of that or you are really trapped into reactive conducting. So how do we break out of it? Here's something to keep in mind. When you're working with a record and you're conducting along with them, try to find times when you disagree with what the record is doing. Challenge it. Dislike the tempo. Dislike the interpretation. Dislike whatever it is. Feel like you want to do something different. And when you got to that point, you realized that your own musical interpretation is beginning to emerge. It's time to get rid of the recording and really start to consider building your own take on this. It's a great day when you discover that the recording is not the be-all to end-all. It's just the beginning.